My name is Carol, and I have a mental illness, and this is my story. I don't remember much of my childhood until I was 5 years old. I've never known who my father was or where he might be. This has always made me feel like I was missing a part of my life. I was sexually abused for 4 years by a stepfather between the ages of 5 and 9. My family never believed me, so I had to deal with it in my own way, which caused me a lot of discomfort. He eventually was caught by my mother, and after that, my mother felt she could no longer raise his children. And after visiting her on another visit, I watched her sign papers to give us up to the state. I felt alone and thought, what have I done not to be wanted? I was put in foster care where the people they sent me to were emotionally and mentally abusive. I had no say in anything I did or decisions that were made of myself. They always made me feel like I was worthless. I was adopted at the age of 12 by an older couple. I loved them, but felt like they didn't understand where I'd come from. Granted, for the first time in my life, there was no abuse of any kind, but felt they didn't fully understand what I had really gone through. I decided to join the Army Reserves and went through basic training after my junior year in school. I came back and graduated at mid-semester on my senior year. When I was 18, my parents kicked me out of the house because of drinking. I thought I had it made. I didn't have to live with my parents, and I was free. I soon realized that I had no job, no home, and no place to go. I lived in my car. After living in my car for a while, I went through my second round of training for the Army. And I was drunk pretty much every night because of not having a good relationship with my family. Not long after I came from training, I received a call that my biological family was looking for me. I called them, and they came and got me and brought me to Missouri. That's when I decided to stay in Missouri. Later that year, I married, and I got married for all the wrong reasons. And after a couple of years, I found out my husband was having an affair with a family member. Even though it devastated me, I stayed around. I then received the best thing from our marriage, my 2 beautiful children. After my youngest was a year old, I left my husband. I felt alone and that no one was there for me. I was devastated that I was getting a divorce. I started dating a guy I met at the bar. Yes, I was still drinking every night. I felt it was the only way that I could feel better about myself. We got married after 5 years of being together. He was a drug user and got me to using drugs as well. We did all kinds, but I found the one I loved the most was cocaine. After long, I felt that the cocaine was what I needed to survive and realized I could become an addict. And on my own, I decided to quit and haven't done any since. Later, I found out he was being inappropriate to my children. I felt that I had let them down and that I was a terrible mother. I've had a hard time forgiving myself. Even though my children have forgiven me, I'm always working on forgiving myself. After that, I left him and got yet another divorce. Talk about being a failure twice. About a year later, I started dating another guy I met at a bar, definitely still drinking. I felt it was the only way to make the bad feelings go away. After moving in with him, we started having fights. He told me he thought I needed to get help. I didn't believe him. I was fine. One morning, we got into a really bad fight, and I went to work. I was so upset that I got to the point that I couldn't stand living. My life was miserable. I took all my medications that I had at the time and found a corner and waited to die. An ambulance was called and took me to the hospital. I was put into a psych ward where I was locked in. I had never experienced anything like this. It scared me a lot. All I thought of was, what have I done? At this time, I received my first psychiatrist, who diagnosed me with clinical depression. After a while, I started having more suicidal thoughts and started receiving shock treatments. They worked for a time, but after having long-term memory loss, I had a hard time, and I didn't remember seeing a doctor for a while after that. I married again for all the wrong reasons. I was lonely. The marriage lasted only 6 months because he was treating me like I was nothing, which is what I felt. Feeling that I had nobody and was a total failure to the world, and thought, what good am I? Later, I met yet another guy, of course from a bar. We lived together for a while, and of course it didn't last long because I was looking for someone to care about me, but found I couldn't even care about myself. I found a really good job and soon moved out and got a great apartment. About a year after working there, I had another breakdown. My caseworker I had at the time came and took me to the hospital. During the 2 weeks there, I had yet another set of shock treatments, and don't remember being there for those 2 weeks at all. After that, my doctor put his foot down and advised me if I didn't stop drinking, he would stop my medication. I knew then that I really needed the medication for my illness, and today I rarely drink alcohol, if any. During this time, I met my fourth husband. I fell totally in love and believed him to be my soulmate. He also felt the same way. He was very supportive of my illness, and we married in 2003. I didn't know that the next 10 years of my life would be very difficult. You see, he was an alcoholic. Over those 10 years, I was in and out of the hospital for depression and suicide attempts. During this time, I was accepted at BJC Behavioral Health, where I received a caseworker and a doctor. My diagnosis changed from clinical depression to bipolar with suicidal tendencies. Even though we found medicines that worked, I still had to deal with my husband's alcoholism. My caseworker got me into a DBT class, dialectical behavior therapy, and where you learn to use skills like core mindfulness and emotion regulation. Another diagnosis was added to my file. I was borderline personality disorder, which means I could change how I feel very quickly depending on what's going on in my life. At this time, I started going to Friends in Action Clubhouse, where with the help of the staff and the members there, made me feel wanted. Just knowing there was a place where I could go to be with people that had the same illness as I do, and they'd understood what I was going through, and it was comforting. Even though I was doing everything I could to help myself, my problems were still building up at home. By this time, I had received Social Security and was supporting us financially. During those 10 years, my husband barely worked 5 jobs, the longest 9 months. He would lose his job over his illness and would not get help. I tried everything I could to help him, but nothing worked. Because of his lying and stealing of many things to get money to drink, I was always depressed and never would understand why. My caseworker at the time kept telling me I needed to get away from him. I finally got to the end of my rope and couldn't take it anymore. I really had no family to turn to, for they did not like the way he treated me, and I hardly saw them. It was at this time I decided to do things a little differently. I had lost myself and did not know where to look. I called a friend I met at the clubhouse and told her I was going to step in front of an 18-wheeler because I couldn't take it anymore. She asked me to hold on till I got there, till she got there. She had saved my life. I felt really good knowing someone out there really cared if I lived. After being at her home for a week, I had decided that I didn't want to go back to the life that I had. I made then the decision again to get another divorce. And having feelings of being a